Hello, and welcome to the Problem with Men podcast, the podcast where we explore the issues that face modern men. As an independent podcast, we rely on your support, so please leave a review, share us with a friend, or consider making a PayPal donation to keep us going. Details are in the episode description. In this episode, we're looking at fatherhood. Although perceptions are moving, parenting is still seen predominantly as the mother's domain. Things are changing, and lockdown, working from home, and a trend of pushing for a better work-life balance has sped up the ability for fathers to be more active in their kids' lives. But there is still the imbalance of paternity leave, and sometimes a father-daughter trip to the park can lead to calls to the police. We're lucky to have been able to speak to 5 dads about their journey to parenthood, the joys and anxieties of fatherhood, what they get out of being an active parent, and crucially, we've even managed to get a couple of dad jokes.
You're listening to the Problem with Men podcast.
We all know starting a family is a big deal. We've all heard about the sleepless nights, messy nappies, and endless costs. So when is the right time to start a family?
For us, I definitely wanted to be a dad at some point.
Jim Coulson is a dad of 2 and has blogged about his experiences at bewildereddad.com.
And it was one of those things where it just never seemed really the right time for a long time. You know, there's a time when we were living in London for a bit and that didn't really seem the right time to have kids. And then we moved up north and it's just starting kind of a job there and it just didn't seem right. We got married for a bit and then, we got married for a bit. We got married, not for a bit. And we had a bit of time then and it just, it never seemed like a time when everything was quite right. And I think you get to a point where you realize, I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time. You're never going to have that perfect job. So we decided that we'd have kids.
Andy Ahmed Welsh is a parent to 2 kids and recently moved in with his current partner and her 2 kids.
I had my first child in my early 30s. I guess I'd come from quite a big family. I actually didn't know my father for the first 20 years of my life, but I always wanted kids. But it had to be kind of the right time, in terms of being able to support them in the proper way with the right person. So I took you can tell me whether it's quite early or late having a child in your early 30s, probably about average actually. But yeah, in the back of my mind, I'd always wanted kids. And, I just felt like a good time. I had a good job, bought a house, settled down with a long-term partner who I'm not with anymore, by the way. And then, she wanted children as well. So it just seemed to kind of fall into place. It's almost like a subconscious thing, isn't it? I think you just kind of feel like, now you're ready. It's kind of bookmarking a period in your life as well. I think, there was kind of my roaring 20s, going out and partying in Liverpool and, 2 or 3 nights going to clubs and going to the pub on a Sunday afternoon and hanging out with friends all the time. And, it's amazing. And actually, I'd give up anything to go back to those times sometimes. But also, after a number of years doing that, you kind of think, there is more to life. And I wanted to kind of change things up really and settle down almost.
Al Booth is a father of 2 and hosts the How to Be a Dad podcast.
It was quite traditional. It was just date for a bit, get engaged, talk about having children, try for a child. We were so lucky. Because we thought, right, now's the time. We've got the house, got a new build house. We moved in. Thought now's the time after we've been together. So Alfie's from 2017. We've been together 3.5 years. We thought, right, we'll try. We thought we'll try for a baby. If we don't have a baby, we don't get pregnant soon, we'll get married, because we'd already started looking at wedding venues. And we were so lucky because we tried for a baby and got pregnant pretty much straight away. And that was that with child number 1. And it was all quite straightforward. And we're so lucky. Everything came back as it should. He came out pretty much as he should.
And finding out you're going to be a dad is probably a magical experience, right?
I was in Sainsbury's in the car park and I had a WhatsApp from her and it was the pregnancy test and it was 2 red lines. And she said, look, 2 red lines. And I thought, I just naturally associated like red marks with school. And I was like, oh no, oh, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It's, we've just started trying. We'll try again. It's okay. And she just messaged me going, what are you talking about? I think you need to call me. And yeah, turns out that was the moment that in movies, there's all like orchestras playing and everyone rushes into each other's arms. But no, I just didn't understand how it worked.
Episode 3 of our podcast looked at the fertility crisis that's affecting men. We spend a lot of our lives paranoid about pregnancy, but very rarely does it happen right away for couples. Jim Coulson again.
Our first child took ages. We were trying for a long, long time. In fact, I was vegetarian at the time, and because we've been trying for a long time, I was just kind of like, well, is there anything I can do? And I read somewhere that a vegetarian diet wasn't necessarily that good for conceiving, so I gave up being a veggie, started eating meat again, and genuinely within a couple of months, we were expecting. I don't know whether it was connected. Because you read a lot of stuff on the internet. Who knows whether it's true or not? But for us, eventually it happened, and we had our firstborn in 2013. So I would have been 34, which I guess is quite old. But everyone's different, aren't they? And yeah, it was great. And then we had our second a few years later. He was born 3.5 years later, and that just happened sort of almost straight away. And then I went for a vasectomy because 2 children is plenty. I don't want to be outnumbered. And you do have control over whether you're outnumbered or not. And I wanted to exert that control. I love my kids. They're amazing. But I don't want to go through that baby stage anymore. For me, the baby stage is not the one. That's not the best bit. It just gets better and better and better after that. The baby stage is something that you just have to get your tin hat on and endure and just get through it. And then eventually it comes good.
Even for those of us without kids, we have some awareness of the sleepless nights and endless crying. But the stress and anxiety of parenthood starts well before you've changed your first dirty nappy. Al Booth explains.
But it is then you're just worrying until they're here, really. Because you get excited, but you don't want to get too excited. It's a bit like if you get offered your dream job and you haven't signed the contract, or you take your driving test. Someone once told me, don't tell anyone you're taking your driving test until you've passed it. And it is the same thing. Almost. It's that, you don't want to sort of go, yeah, right, we're going to buy this, we'll plan this, because 9 months is a long time and there's so much that could go wrong. And you get the results back of whether they are going to have problems in birth or in life with health issues and stuff. So you have to go for scans and you go for the tests that all that ensues. And then there's, what if they do have something, then it's just, yeah, there's a lot of anxiety. It's so strange. It's such a conflicting time because you're naturally excited, obviously, but just naturally really just worry,
But at least the birth is an exciting, magical experience.
My brother-in-law, his son was born the year before our son. And he was like, it's the most amazing thing when you meet them. Instantly, you never know love like it. And I was like, this is going to be incredible. So when he was in labour, he kept coming forward. It's going to ruin my partner's dignity. Kept coming forward, and then you could see his hair, and then he would go up again, and then come out and go up. And they had to try and relax my partner, but also then give her epidurals, the drugs, and then his heartbeat would drop really low. And you're there as the sort of, I don't know, you feel a bit of a spare part because you haven't had a human inside you for 9 months, and then you're trying to get it out. So when that happened, the doctors came in, and my partner's looking at me going, "Is everything all right?" And you're down the other end, and you can see the monitors low, and you can hear them, and you're just trying to smile and go, yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's fine. But also you're like really worried. You're scared because you might lose your child you've not met yet. So there was that kind of went on and off for an hour or so. But they seemed to monitor it. And then eventually he came out and I was waiting for that. This is like love that I've never known before. And my first two thoughts were, one, he's got a head like an alien because they had to use the ventouse, which is where they sucker them out. So he had a really pointy head. And my other thought, I feel so bad and I wish it wasn't this. I just looked at the clock and I was like, I generally don't, because he was born at 5 to 4 in the morning. I generally don't know when I'm going to get to sleep again. That was my instant thought. I was like, which is terrible. And I'm still having that thought 5 years on, to be honest. But yeah. But then when you that comes out, that's so weird. But when all that's done, and then they clean him up and they give him to you, and it is just, you're just so aware of your position in the world all of a sudden. It's funny because you do just have to know you're going to look after them. And actually, it doesn't matter about, like, all the stuff you mentioned, all the money and everything like that. You just know that somehow you will just look after them. You'll just love them and you'll make sure they're fed and they're warm. And it's such a primal thing, really.
Barrington Reeves is a dad of 4, including one set of twins.
I was at the birth, I was buzzing. It was exciting, but it was also scary, like watching this child emerge, and it's like, oh my God. Just, wow. It's like, to see it, it's just this awe-inspiring experience, but it's quite scary as well, because it's like the evidence of this life is in my hands now, and like holding him, like, woof, it's like so fragile. You know, I don't know how to explain it fully. It's just awe and joy and scary. It's everything. That's the only way I can describe it. It's everything. It is everything, but the overwhelming experiences of joy and happiness and excited, and it's like, wow. But in that as well, there's different emotions, and I suppose each birth is different. And when the twins were born and they were like 13 minutes apart, it's like there's one popped out. Wow. Okay. The second one's popped out. Oh my God. Oh, it's like, oh gosh, like, and I'm holding both of them. And it's like, you're looking at them, who's who and which is which. And does one look like me? And it's just crazy. Because there's no one thing that you can kind of put your finger on and say, I felt that or I thought that. It's just a blur. But in it, there's this nice, warm feeling that, oh my gosh, they're healthy and they're alive and they're breathing. And it's like, yeah, it takes your breath away. I think I've had a connection with all my children, because during the pregnancy, I connected with them in the womb. I'd rub my partner's belly and talk to the baby and the fetus and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting now, working with this new baby observation, that's some of the things that the sharing with men to do with the new babies. But I didn't know about this new baby observation tool. I just did it by instinct. And I think most men do that because that actually creates the connection. And the more that you do it and the more that you see the child responding in the womb, is the more that you want to do it, because it's developing that connection.
Okay, but you've got your child now. Things are plain sailing from here, right? I'll booth.
Oh yeah, that car drive home, that journey from because it's mad. They just give you this child. They just give you a baby. Like, it's harder to get out of Tesco having done a shop than it is to leave a hospital with your baby. It's like, right, you can go now. I'm like, brilliant. Who's going to come home and show us how everything works then? No one. So you're just carrying the baby in the little car seat thing, holding it really tight with two hands, so it's barely moving. Get it in the car. Everything's like really slow motion and gentle. And then Kerry sat in the back with him. And then, yeah, you're on the motorway. And, you know, I commute an hour to work each day, an hour there, an hour back each day. Windows down, music blaring, whatever, you're carefree. But that was so intense, that drive home. It was only about 20 minutes on the motorway, but so intense. And then you get in the house and then you're just like, a bit like the thing with the sleep. You're like, well, this is it. This is life, but we're with a stranger. We don't know him. He doesn't know us. This little thing. And you can't really do anything because they're not at toddler stage yet. And they're just there, and they all cry. And then you have to work out if they're crying because they're hungry or because they're nappy or they're tired. And then you're just deprived of sleep. Like, Kerry and I used to wake up in the middle of the night and have arguments about things that we'd dreamt about because we were still so tired that we think... I remember her going, why have you eaten my dressing gown? I was like, what are you on about? I haven't eaten your dressing. You ate my... And then she'd go, oh, no, it's a dream. So, yeah, it's just strange.
Jim Coulson.
It's just hard. There's no sleep. There's a little bundle of tears and screams that has no way of telling you what's wrong with it. Although, actually, to be fair, when they can tell you what's wrong with them as well, that doesn't make it any easier. Because, like, sometimes you just can't help. But yeah, it's just, they don't do a lot. You know, they look cute, yeah, and you get lots of nice cuddles. That's nice. And lots of people come around and coo at your baby. But it is tough as far as I'm concerned. Especially ours were quite tough kids, and they start teething, and then you get the sleepless nights, and it's just a constant worry as well. I was talking about this with some mates the other day, that especially your firstborn, everything's like a worry. Everything's like a concern. Everything's just checking every moment. Guys, is she still breathing? Is that the right thing to do? And it's a lot more relaxed with your second, but still, there's lots of concerns about small children. Do we have to sterilize everything? You know, are they going to pick anything up off the floor? We've got a dog. Is that going to be a problem? And I prefer it when they're just a bit bigger and they're just kind of easier to deal with and a joy to deal with as well, because you can have actual conversations with them as well. Oh, it is completely terrifying. Exhilarating in some ways. You know, it's like, wow, you know, this is a thing that we've created and we get to look after them. But in other ways, yeah, it's just like every moment of every day when they're in that baby stage, they're completely relying on you. And you have to be there and you have to make the right decisions. Or if you make the wrong decisions, you have to make the right decision then as quickly as you can, because you made the wrong one and you just don't know what the right decision is.
Dan Flanagan is a father of one.
It's terrifying. The first night we brought my son home, nobody had told us how deeply newborns actually sleep. So you're on hypervigilance anyway. You're waking up every 15 minutes to make sure the child's all right. And my little bugger of a son slept so deeply that we thought he wasn't breathing. So at 3:30 in the morning, we called out an ambulance because we were terrified that something had happened to him. The ambulance people came along, slapped him on the arse. He cried, absolutely fine. But we didn't have any sort of extended family or network around us to be able to tell us any of those sort of little those stories. We had to kind of make it up as we went along. So I'd read the books, I'd read the blogs and stuff that were out there, but nothing actually resonated with me. Sleep was non-existent. The pressure of work was intent. And because babies are so small and so fragile, you immediately think you're going to break them. But they're pretty hardy things, you know. So if I've relaxed, I don't know if I truly have, to be honest. There's still work to do. I know my son's 10, but, you know, I know now that if he falls over, he's not probably going to seriously hurt himself.
Dan was raised by his dad as a single parent, which has given him a unique view on parenthood.
I think I always wanted to be a dad. I certainly always wanted a son. It goes back to when I was a child. Unfortunately, my mum was really ill, and my parents got divorced, and my dad got custody of me and my three sisters in the 70s and 80s, which was highly unusual. So I was able to see things. First of all, the abject lack of support there was there, because, you know, there were single parent events and clubs, but primarily they were there for mums that wore dungarees and voted for C&D, which obviously I do, but my dad didn't fit into that. He was quite a successful businessman that run, you know, a large organisation. Suddenly, through the hand of fate, he's got me as a 5 or 6 year old and 3 teenage girls to deal with. You know, it was an interesting and eye-opening time. So I knew. So I always wanted to be a dad. I love being a dad. I think it's an exceptional privilege, but it comes at a large cost, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually. It's physically exhausting. But there's very little support there for dads that want to be active parents.
Becoming a parent yourself can change how you view your relationship with your own dad. Jim Coulson.
Yeah, I guess I've... what was I? I was thinking about something earlier today. And it's something that I'd never appreciated until I just thought about it today based on the knowledge of what I have now of being a kid. And I guess that, like, I don't think I've ever been ungrateful for my parents, for my dad. But maybe there were times when I didn't realize sort of the sacrifices or the way that he went out of his way to help me out when I was younger, because I just kind of took it for granted, maybe. Because you would do anything for your kids, and I would do anything for my kids. And, you know, that's why, you know, we do the really kind of tricky logistical getting them to after school clubs and getting them fed and stuff and taking one to one place and one to the other place. You do that just because you want them to have the richest experience and, you know, the best life that you can make for them. And I don't think I'd really thought about that. I mean, I knew that, you know, my parents were great and were really loving, and I'd had a great kind of upbringing, but I never really thought about the details of it. And what I was thinking about today, really random. It was sparked by something my kids were watching on telly, and they were watching a cartoon, and in it there was like a character on TV, and they'd used this sort of old sort of fuzzy TV filter to make it look like it was on the telly, which I thought was strange because, like, kids who are watching that now don't know telly like it used to be when you got it through an aerial and you had to kind of move the aerial around. And that made me think about the sort of when I had a TV in my room and I had one of those rubbishy little aerials that you put on top of your telly to try and get the reception. Oh God, like, I'm really aging myself with this. And I had it in my room when I was a kid, and it was awful. It was no good at all. And then I was thinking about how I'd obviously must have said that to my dad, and he'd gone out and he'd bought like a roof aerial and gone up and stuck it in the loft and stuff and connected it all together. And there was no question about that at all. He'd just gone and done it. And I just thought, that's a right effort to go to just so I can watch telly in a slightly less fuzzy manner. And it was just one of those things that came up that I was like, oh yeah, actually, if I asked him to do something, he would just do it, no matter how much out of his way. And now I think about that now, and I think that's a day wasted, right? That's a day spent going to the DIY shop, coming back, putting it up, labor and stuff like that. And obviously I would do it for my kids, and he did it for me. And it made me appreciate things like that, which I think at the time I'd just gone, oh yes, my dad, that's what he does. And now I thought, oh, actually, no, that is going out of his way, because he probably had better things to do that day than do that.
While our idea of parenting roles are changing and dads are becoming more active and involved in raising children, we are still in a transition period. Dan Flanagan.
Yeah, I think in the early part of my life, especially when we were babies, my dad was very busy building his business. And he used to make a joke that he had 4 kids, but he never changed a nappy. Men like him, it was seen as feminine to push a pram around or do anything like that, where I was right the other way. And I was very proud of my role. And I remember going to see my dad, and it's like, baby needs changing. And he was like, oh, what are you going to do? Well, just going to do it. Go. And he said, oh, doesn't it make you sick? I said, yeah, but baby needs changing. End of story. So I saw, I think he became enlightened, if anything. And of mine, I suppose, a lot more sympathy for the pressures that he must have gone through, but he never spoke about it. He never showed any vulnerability or weakness in that. But looking after 4 kids on his own, he must have had some really dark times.
And often there is still a stigma around men taking care of children.
But then it's trying to find that line between not wrapping up in cotton ball and being seen as completely irresponsible, because the rest of the parents can be really judgmental. And especially if you're a dad, because mums know best. So you get that added, those things that, when you're out with your child, oh, aren't you a good boy for giving mum a bit of a day off? Or do you want me to do that? I was like, no, I'm quite capable of changing a nappy, thanks. Wouldn't mind if there's more change facilities in men's toilets. That would be helpful. But I think I've kind of got this covered. It's trial by public, or a lot of our dads have gone through, some quite traumatic, separation, divorce things, myself included. And our stories are never, ever heard. The narrative around that, to be honest, I was pretty engaged in the school run and organising activities and stuff. When I separated from my ex-wife, I was Jimmy Savile's wingman. You know what I mean? Distasteful, to put it politely.
As well as being a dad, Barrington Reeves has spent most of his working life supporting families, and particularly dads, and currently runs the Sowing Seeds project in Manchester.
If you think of fatherhood globally, I think what's happened is that the idea of fatherhood and the actual role of fatherhood have been it's been redefined, but it's been redefined in terms of how society functions. So that the need for men to be in the home in the beginning, and I'll use that quote unquote, wasn't there. Men were out. So with the rise of feminism, the understanding of patriarchy, and that men's roles were more physical, so that need for men to be out grafting as such has declined. And it's declined since the Second World War in the Western world, but in other countries around the world, there's still some of that. So I think it's in the Western world, fatherhood has been redefined, and men haven't caught up with the fact that that's been redefined for them, because men now are wanting to be at home and play a more active role in their children's lives, whereas before that wasn't necessarily the case. And that's what's made the change. But it's how do those two things, the idea of it and the actual practical application, have changed, and more men are wanting to do that or are being forced into doing that. So it's like a transition, and I think men are still in that transition. But it's contradictory because women want and have got their kind of bag. They're out there, they're working, they're doing all these things. But if you look at men in that same kind of sphere, it doesn't work, or it doesn't happen. And if it does happen, they're being defined as not man enough, and that fathering role is defined within that kind of dimension, and it's contradictory. So men are trying to negotiate that contradiction as fathers. If a man is if there's lots of single fathers, but nobody thinks as men as being single fathers, and that's, for me, I define it as these men and masculinity, men stroke fathers, because fathering is a role that a man undertakes, like mothering is a role that a woman undertakes. It doesn't define who and what they are as human beings, but society has deemed a woman is a mother, and that's who she is, and then the rest of what she does is an add-on, whereas a man is a man. Sowing seeds came out of the fact I was working in health, and so I used to be working in family support with social services, and two of my colleagues worked in leaving care with Bernardo's, and one worked with 42nd Street, which is a young people's mental health charity. And one of my friends, he worked on a national project with Bernardo's called the Baby Father Initiative, which was focused on working with African and Caribbean men and fathers, because the author, Patrick Augustin, had written a book called Baby Father, and it was just a book about the experiences of being a man and being a father in the Caribbean community and all the issues. So they developed this project nationally to engage with black men and fathers. So Sowing Seeds came out of that. But in the midst of that, I ended up having my three children, the three younger children, by myself. So it's kind of apt that being a single father and then talking about fatherhood experiences, I kind of started doing that. So it was born out of that. So the four of us as individuals set up Sowing Seeds to facilitate that Bernardo's project. And then when that project kind of not finished, I kind of decided we'll carry it on and carry on the work from that Baby Father Initiative to work with men and fathers. And it kind of grew from there. We facilitated men's groups, black men, Caribbean men especially, and then it kind of expanded where we worked with the Caribbean women, because they were always up in arms about why are men having men's groups and women are not included. So we involved them, and then me, being the cheeky person that I am, took the findings from the men's groups to the voluntary sector networking organization and shared, this is what we're doing in terms of men and fathers, and these things are not being addressed. So it kind of helped bring us more to the fore in Manchester, because I think men and fathers was on the agenda because the Labour was kind of men friendly at that time. And then, I got co-opted onto a voluntary sector rep on a board in the Children and Families Forum, and then the council co-opted me to be a voluntary sector rep on their parenting board and Children and Family Services board. And it kind of just developed from there, where I was just pushing the agenda about men and fathers and using policy and legislation to just have discussions and get the agenda on the table.
With the best will in the world, relationships can end, and being a single-parent dad, or even a dad who co-parents, can bring its own unique challenges. Dan Flanagan again.
Being a dad and being a middle-aged man can be really quite lonely, but we're just not built in the way to put our hands up and say we need support. But that has some really, terrible side effects. Unfortunately, there's 96 men under the age of 45 being lost every single week to suicide in this country, and it's because men don't talk, and that really, really needs to change. So, I started this because I reached middle age. I was commuting. I'd realise I'd get home very late at night if I was lucky to see my son. And then on the Saturday, I'd have to go to the park on my own. I'd go to soft play on my own. And then my dad, unfortunately, he was very ill previously for a few years, but he passed away. And I did the typical man thing of not talking about it. I just put it to one side and carried on with life. But then 6 months later, it came back and it bit me really hard. I became very, very ill. And that made me really reassess things. So I ended up giving up that commute. Starting again, I was blogging about being a dad. And, one day I just got fed up of going to mother and baby groups and feeling like an outsider or not having the ability to organise play dates. So I put a flag in the ground and says, does anybody want to play with me? Sometimes it's easier. You remember when you were a kid and you want somebody to play with, you just wander around the park, put your hand up, who wants to play army? No girls. Suddenly you've got a group of 15 friends to play with. Can't do that as a man. Certainly not as a middle-aged man.
Dan set up Dadly Soul, a parenting group for dads.
We used to meet up in a pub once a month, and you'd have 20 or so blokes that were strangers. We'd go round and go, right, so what was your excuse for not coming tonight? And you'd say, work's too busy, kissing it. And it's basically because we're socially awkward. We don't want to walk into a strange place with people we don't know. So we kind of got away from all of that. And, pretty much everybody is welcome. It doesn't matter how much money you've got in your bank, what you do for a job. The bottom line is those three letters, DAD. There's your common thread right away through it. I don't care, what background you come from. So, it's sort of grown. We've got 7 active groups. We partner with social housing providers, tech innovation centres. We're working with a couple of universities on research projects to change the narrative around modern-day fatherhood. And it's lovely. It's a really safe community, but rather than waiting for, the point of crisis where if men actually ask for help, then they have to go into a room, sit in a circle and bear their inner feelings. We'll put on a DJ workshop, we'll put on stand-up comedy, we'll put on the VR headsets, a game of pool, come and have a beer. So the dads can come along, build some relationships, and through that, then they start really opening up. So it becomes a very potent thing.
As well as being a fun and active social group for dads and their kids, they also try to address some of the more difficult challenges of parenthood.
You don't want to be seen as weak or a victim, or all of those names that we're probably called in the playground. You got to be stand up, you've got to be staunch. You've got to take it on the chin. We're a nation of men. And it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense, because that's where all these issues happen, whether it's drowning your sorrows, but too much alcohol or substance abuse or, domestic violence. And it just needs to come out in a really healthy way where it's not judged. We've had dads open up about their kids transitioning, or dads whose children have got additional needs, and the fact that maybe they'd always had this vision of having a little baby Johnny and going down the football with him, and now they can't. But they can't say that out loud. Or we've had dads that have come to terms with their own sexuality much later in life. But where do they go? Because they don't want to go to a niche support group because they don't fit in there. But what they can do is come and talk to the lads and just get a bunch of, shoulders to cry on, or, advice or signpost. None of us are, apart from our, our resident conflict resolution expert, we're just everyday blokes. That's exactly, it takes a village mentality to raise a child. But I've been very privileged to hear some really heartwarming and heartbreaking stories of these men. But if you met them in the flesh, you wouldn't think that they're going through this, because they present in a very different way. It's only when you dig a little bit deeper and you open up these conversations like the ones we're having.
If you're enjoying this podcast, support our work by leaving a rating or review on your favourite podcast app. The Problem with Men podcast.
COVID and lockdowns have led to more dads working from home or working flexibly, allowing them to have more time with their kids. This is something we should fight to keep as the normal position. Andy Ahmed Welsh again.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I think it's kind of I've always had the hybrid working roles apart from that one job when my child was quite young. So it's not been a radical change for me, to be honest. So it's great to see that a lot more men are able to have that more hands-on approach, because I am so grateful for being able to watch my kids grow up. Being able to get to their school plays, being able to go to the bake sales occasionally after school and things like that. It's those little things that actually, I think if I look back, I won't have any regrets, because I've been there. Oh, I love it. I could always be more active, but I absolutely love it. Like I said, I think the kids are the best thing that I've ever done with my life, and I think my goals, my ambition. I was talking to my partner about this actually. She's very ambitious. As she kind of went through that journey as a mum, she had the kids, she had a really good career, had kids, and took a lot of time out to raise her kids. And now she's kind of really got a bit between the teeth, and she's back to work, and she's really ambitious and driven to get back to where she was prior. Whereas I've always kind of managed to really strike an amazing balance between having a successful career and being quite present and hands-on with the kids. Could I have had a more successful career if I kind of put my foot on the gas a bit more with that aspect? I could have, I think. I could have achieved more, although moderately successful. But for these past few years, for me, it's all been about balance. And my son is going to go to secondary school next year, and then with my daughter a couple more years, and I think then I can kind of maybe look at roles which aren't as much hybrid, maybe a bit more office focused and things like that as they get a bit older. They don't want to know me, and I can look through that again now. But I think I've been really lucky.
There's still a lot of work to be done to recognise the value that being an active dad can bring. Jim Coulson.
I had a blog post that went sort of semi-viral a few years ago, because I'd got this pot of Heinz ready-made baby food, and on the side of it said made from a recipe by Sophie, a mum just like you. And it's like, come on, it's not just mums that feed kids, surely. And I think marketing is really struggling to keep up with change, because I think the change in the world is definitely, from what I see anyway, and I can only speak from my own experience, is that the dads that I know are so much more hands-on than a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations ago. And it's only going in one direction because, we've got things like shared parental leave, which I know has not had a lot of massive amount of uptake, but that will get bigger and bigger. Also, people working from home now, you've got both parents working from home. So actually, it's a lot easier for them to share the childcare responsibilities as well. And I think that the marketers have to catch up with this, because there still are, it's still recommended by mums, or this is why mums love this, or, and it's ridiculous. And the way Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig is portrayed as well, that's a shocking one. I mean, justice for Daddy Pig is what I say, because he's treated like absolute dirt. But I think it's getting better, and I think people are starting to realise that dads are an active part of their child's life, and there is still the imbalance in that kind of women, especially early on, tend to do more of the childcare, because obviously they have the child and they have to have, a little bit of time off, obviously, at least. And so they are more likely to be with the child early on, and especially if the child's breastfeeding. But I think after that, I think we're evening up a little bit. And yeah, I don't think I've got anything to prove. I don't think dads have anything to prove, but I just think we need, as society, as this generation kind of grows up and, becomes more of the kind of mainstream, I guess that will be reflected in how the media, how the marketers view parenting. And parenting is getting a lot more equal than it used to be. So I think that's a good sign.
Projects like Dadless Soul and Sowing Seeds are crucial, because as we learn time and time and again on this podcast, men are terrible at opening up, asking for help and advice, and sharing our fears. Reaching out to other dads can be quite simple though. I'll booth again.
And then just one day, Kerry was at work, I think, had gone back to work. So Alfie was only about 6 months, and he was just crying and crying, and it was hot, and just, had him in his nappy, and he just wouldn't stop, and I just didn't know what to do. And because that's the difficult thing, because you can't communicate with them. So it's not like, right, just sit down, tell me what's wrong. They're just crying. And I had that a few days, and I was really just having sort of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what my role is here. I don't know how to do it. I thought being parenting, you just pick them up and hug them. And so I went back to the doctor then. I was really struggling, but I got put on some medication. But apart from that, I think dads could get more support. But I think out the two of us, but that's not just dads. That's any mental. And if you're feeling down about work or anything, you should always try and talk to someone about it, share it, go and see the GP. It's the basic thing. I would absolutely recommend that. It just so happened my trigger was being a parent at that time, but I think, I think if you can support your partner, because I don't know if this is an old-fashioned view, but support your partner because they've been through the labour, the pregnancy, the labour, everything afterwards, but then have somewhere where you can go and you can chat. And funnily enough, recently we just started a WhatsApp group for the dads of my son's school, and my partner's been on about it for ages because she's with all the mums, and I was like, it's not really dad thing to do, but actually I just put it out there. I was like, look, Kerry wants me to start this. I get it if you're not interested. It'd be quite nice to meet up. And everyone's come back and we can meet up, and we talk about the kids in the way that the mums do. And it's really interesting, actually. It's really nice that you just go, other dads just talk about the kids, and that's lovely. And it's not a sort of, I want to get away from, because you see all these loads of social media accounts where it's like, oh no, want to just sit down and have gin and blah, blah, blah. And they're all funny. But actually, it's quite nice to be a dad. It's the best thing in the world for me that I've ever done. And and just knowing other people share it. But also when it's hard, it's just quite nice to be able to go, look, Alfie's going through this phase at the moment. And actually, as I speak to you, he's going through this phase where he doesn't want to be left alone when he goes to bed, and then he'll come in the middle of the night and get into our bed. And it's really hard. And so just talking to other dads about that, that's really good, because you realise that, you know, Kerry's always like, me and my mates from school, who I'm still in touch with, they're always like, my best friend Ben will just go, now then, Tubby, how are you? And I'm not particularly tubby. I'm a little bit, a little bit middle-aged, but he always has done since school. She's like, women never talk to each other like that. And I was like, it's just, I call him Baldy. He's got a full head of hair. I don't know why. That stemmed from something when we were about 16, and I can't even remember what it is. But as well as that, we have the most open conversations about, and my friend Ben's got, his son's just started uni, so he's 18. He's got a stepdaughter who's 23, and his oldest daughter is 16. So I'll just go to him and say, look, this is happening with the kids, and how do you cope, and what do you do? And we'll come back and, just have real open conversations. And the same with the dads from the group. I think that's probably changed a lot. That's probably is the most surprising thing, actually, because you just think it's going to be, banter. But I think everyone now is quite open. Yeah, that's a really nice side of it, actually.
When it comes to parenting, everyone seems to have an opinion. But what do our dads think the most important thing is? Andy Ahmed Welsh.
I think that's okay. It's okay to moan about your kids in private to other people. It's very cathartic, I think, to just have a whinge sometimes, a pain in the backside. And, you have to be able to say, God, that was a tough day. You've been an absolute pain in the backside.
Jim Coulson.
Just keep going, keep trying, keep being kind, and persist. Which makes it sound negative. I don't really mean it in a negative way, but I think you do. You just have to continue what you're doing and keep working at things every day. But it's worth it. So the results are good. So it's hard work, but it is worth it in the end.
Barrington Reeves.
Sort yourself out. Fundamentally, 100% holistically, sort your stuff out. Don't dodge anything. Because if you do, your children will bring it back to your front door with a vengeance, and they will kick you to bits. That's what I would say. Children are one of the best things that a man can have in their life, because it improves them. And to listen to your children, listen to them, pay attention, be present. And if you're not with your children, you're separated, divorced, whatever, even if you can't see your children, think beautiful things about your children. Send them cards, send them birthday gifts, send them little things, small things that make a difference. So when they come back to see you, or if they come to find you, you can actually say, I sent you cards, I wrote you letters, I sent you a birthday. Do you know what I mean? Because children feel those things. Let that little child inside of you come out and play with your children. Like you're a little child. You're ramping with yourself, and that other self is your child. Ramp, play, be silly, be vulnerable, do daft shit. Really doesn't matter. I suppose in the current social environment, be confident in who you are. Be confident in who you are, because social media has a way of defining and constructing all of these different ideas and beliefs about who you are as a person, and it can ruin somebody's self-concept. And that I'll say it like this: your life is your mirror. Whatever's in your life is a reflection of who you are, good, bad, and indifferent. If you don't like what you see in your life, you have the opportunity to change it.
Al Booth.
Just do hugs. Just do hugs, even when they think they're too cool to have hugs. Just do hugs. Now, the number one rule is just, that, and just love them. It's so simple, I think. Just love them. But also make sure you always have a bottle of Jack Daniels in. I think that's it.
And if you're interested in joining a parenting group for dads, Dan has you covered.
So we're on all the social media channels. So that's at Dadlasoul, DADLASOUL. The website's dadlasoul.com, or you can email me, which is just dan@dadlasoul.com. We've got our events are primarily around the Sussex area, but we've got a thriving WhatsApp group. We've got a private Facebook group, and that has members, like I said, from all over the world. And it's men come to go just to put a flag up. They want some help. They want some ideas. They want to share a really good joke that nobody appreciates. So you can just come along and join. It's open to everybody. All our events, they're done pretty much on a donation basis. So it shouldn't just be for, nice middle class people to be able to access the service. It really is for everybody.
Links to Dan's group, as well as our other Dad's podcasts and blogs about fatherhood, are also in the episode description and on our website at theproblemwithmen.co.uk. And of course, this wouldn't be a podcast that truly recognised dads without a few dad jokes. Andy Ahmed Welsh.
So, 2 bits of road walk into a bar, and they walk up to the bar, these 2 grey bits of tarmac, and they go to the barman. Barman, give me a whiskey now on the house. It's not really age appropriate for young kids, I suppose. So the barman goes, I'm not going to give you a whiskey on the house. You need to pay for it. And the grey bit of tarmac goes, give me a whiskey on the house now, or we're going to smash the place up. So the barman goes, oh, okay, don't want any trouble, boys. Don't want any trouble. So he goes and gets a whiskey, gives him the whiskey. The grey bit of tarmac drinks it. And his mate goes, leave the bottle, barman, or we're going to smash the place up. So the barman's like, okay, boys, I don't want any trouble. So he leaves the bottle of whiskey on the bar. And these 2 bits of tarmac are going, yeah, we are really, really tough guys, us, And then this red bit of tarmac walks into the pub. And the 2 grey bits of tarmac, stop talking and look at him. And then the red bit of tarmac goes, orange juice, please, barman. So the barman gives him the orange juice. And the red bit of tarmac goes, here's £10, keep the change. And the barman's like, oh, fantastic, thank you. And the 2 grey bits of tarmac scurry off into the corner. The red bit of tarmac drinks his orange juice, says, thank you, barman, and walks out the door. When he leaves, the 2 grey bits of tarmac walk back to the bar. And the barman goes, I thought you said you 2 were really tough. And they go, yeah, we're tough, but he's a psychopath.
Jim Coulson.
I've got loads of them. How long have you got? No, my favourite dad joke is, why did the baker have smelly hands? Because he needed a poo.
Al Booth.
Favourite dad joke? Well, this is one I read in the joke book when I was a kid, when I was about 8. But I tell to my kids and they love it because it's got a certain word in it. So, what do you get if you cross a skunk and a bear? Winnie the Pooh. I'm really good at it. It's still making me laugh now.
And finally, Dan sums up what it's really all about.
I've got a photo of this. I remember I had my son, he's about 4 or 5 days old, and he's just lying beside me on the couch, and I'm sitting there trying to do a bit of work. And he just looked at me. And it was almost like my heart had opened, and I got this huge rush of love, something that I've never felt so strongly in my entire life. I thought, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm going to make it my life's work to make sure nothing bad happens to you.
This has been the Problem with Men podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please do support the work we're doing by leaving a review or recommending us to a friend. We've got loads of episodes planned and we'd love to hear from you if you have a story or suggestion. You can reach us on most of the mainstream social media sites, and you can contact us via the website at theproblemwithmen.co.uk. Until next time, Goodbye.
The Problem with Men podcast is an Octopus Industries production, produced and presented by Chris Dodd and produced by Sandra Kabasinguzi.